about our successes, and we are celebrating the positive power of play. Well, our next speaker, who you can see over here, embodies this spirit. She is the CEO and founder of Playmob, a platform which connects socially conscious advertisers to millions of engaged global gamers. She is a champion of games for good and profit with purpose. She's a BAFTA Games judge, one of Creative England's top 50 women in tech in Europe, and she also has an MBE for services to entrepreneurship. She is simply incredible, and here to talk to you about her keynote, Playing with Purpose, please welcome to the stage the amazing Jude Ower. Thanks, Jude.
Right, can everyone hear me okay? Is that okay? Great. I don't usually use notes on stage, but we're doing a big launch today, so I'm a little bit, my brain's a bit, can't remember some numbers. So yeah, my name's Jude, and I'm the founder of a company called Playmob, and as was stated, I'm a big believer in games being a powerful force for good. So I thought I would start by learning how to use the clicker. Is this on? Oh. No? Yeah, that's fine. Do you know what? I could just press it here. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah. There we go. Right. Yeah, so big believer that games could be a powerful force for good. And I just thought it would be helpful to give a bit of context in terms of why and how I kind of got started on this journey. So about 2002, I was at Abertay University. And I got involved in a startup that were building games for education and for training. And what really inspired me was watching the change in person through people playing when they were learning as they played. So I'd always been into gaming. When I was 16, I used to kind of pretend I was grounded because I wanted to get to the next level of Sonic and beat Dr. Robotnik, and yeah, I was that sort of kid. And when I saw that you can use games for learning and training, this just blew me away. So it's been a big kind of part of my life since, for all my life. But also as a child as well, I used to play games with my family, and it was a very kind of social thing. So it was never a thing that I did kind of on my own. It was always something I'd collaborated with others on. So yes, when I was at university and I was helping this startup to build games for education and training, it completely opened up my eyes in terms of the positive impact that games can make on people. And I've kind of been a big advocate of that throughout my career. And in 2010, 2011, a couple of things happened that kind of really made me see how games could be used to really drive impact. Gaming is something that has grown over time. Even through a recession, games continue to grow because it's a popular form of entertainment. So we've never seen a slowdown in gaming, and this is how, over the years, I thought, gaming. I was using games for education and training, but I thought, imagine taking the online actions we were taking and making real-world impact and really, making a positive impact at a global scale. So 2010, 2011, two things happened that were really important. So 2010, the earthquake happened in Haiti. And some of you might remember when Zynga launched Sweet Seeds through Farmville, where players could buy an item, buy the seeds in Farmville, and a percentage of money then went to help the victims of the earthquake. They raised $1.5 million in just 5 days, and they also noticed that players were spending money for the first time, they were more engaged, there was more lifetime value, and more virality. So players were really engaging with the fact that the game was doing something good to help a crisis. Second thing that happened, so 2011, probably most of you are familiar with Jane McGonigal, who's a researcher at the Institute of the Future. And in her book, Reality is Broken, she came out with this statement. So this was 2011. She said, we're spending 3 billion hours per week playing games. And if we can get to 21 billion hours per week, we can start solving some of the world's greatest problems like climate change, poverty, and obesity. So this was really forward thinking. This was 2011. And what's interesting now is we're playing for about 16 billion hours per week now. So we're close to this tipping point of 21 billion hours, and it's really exciting because we're starting to see some amazing examples of how games are making a big difference in the world. So I kind of wanted to share in this keynote just a couple of things that we've been working on that we're quite proud of at Playmob. So typically how we work is we make mini games and then distribute them through mobile networks, through media space. So typically you would see adverts in here pop up for another game or another app. And we just think there's a better use of this space. So we use this space in order to educate players on global issues and how they can take action. So that's typically what we do as a business, but we also work with games publishers in other ways. And this is an example of something we worked on in March this year with Pokemon. It looks like people picking up rubbish, and it is. but essentially, we did a global cleanup with Pokemon Go players. So we started it in 2018. And since then, in 1 year, it grew about 20 times. So on Earth Day each year, and it's become a yearly thing now, and we send a note out to all the Pokemon players and say, do you want to be part of a cleanup in your area? So last year, we had about 6,000 people who took part. This year, it was 17,000 people in 41 countries, and we cleared 145 tons of waste, which is huge. So it's grown massively to the point where last year it was just beaches, and we had so much requests from players to say, well, I don't live near a beach. I live near a river or a park, and that needs cleaned too. So we essentially built a system where players, where organisations on the ground can register where they were doing a cleanup. Players could find them, and then we mobilised the cleanup. Last year it was over a weekend. This year it was over 2 weeks, and next year we think it will be bigger. But this just shows the power and scale of what gamers can do when they're given the opportunity to. And it was really simple. We communicated a message out to them to say, we're doing this cleanup, do you want to be part of it? It's a big problem, we need to clean up the planet. And this is just a map of all the locations where the cleanups happened. Hopefully one day this will all be covered in blue. But it was interesting data as well, because I think the most waste came from Mexico. And we had huge cleanups that were happening in India. The cleanups were only the size of logistically how many people you can fit in a location. So some locations were 30 people, I think the biggest was 300. But it was just amazing to see, we had pictures being sent in of, 2 people, like a dad and his son cleaning up, to, swarms of people with their bags. And the rubbish wasn't, there was a process to show that the rubbish was being disposed of ethically, and we had all the logistics set up on the ground. But again, power of what games can do when there's collective action. Another one that we recently worked on, which we're really proud of, was with Dove. So Dove have a self-esteem program, and it's been running since 2004, and in that time they've reached about 27 million people. Now, what they wanted to do was kind of make this digital and use gaming as a way to educate gamers on, or educate people on, body confidence and self-esteem. So we developed this, which is the Self-Esteem Squad. So it's a very short, kind of 1 to 2 minute long game, which is like a platform-style game where you're running along and you have to collect confidence coins and avoid kind of negative comments and negative body image. And you could then share it out, and you can make a pledge to say, what you'll do next. So we want to see people taking action. But this was really interesting because we basically worked out that gaming can do in 6 months what it had previously taken 14 years to do, which is incredible. So in terms of the speed of making impact, Dove have done a fantastic job on how many people they've reached and people's lives that they're changing. But now imagine then applying that to gaming and what we can do in order to reach people and educate them on body confidence and inspire them to take action. And this is just, it's part of the bigger, wider campaign of Dove Self-Esteem, which you've probably seen. They've got a lot of billboards and adverts going out. So the game was the first kind of digital initiative that they tested out, which went really well. So it reached about 4 million people in about 4 weeks, which was incredible. Third example that I wanted to show was, you're probably all familiar with Dumb Ways to Die. Is there anybody who isn't familiar with Dumb Ways to Die? So we love Dumb Ways to Die. So when we got the chance to do this, we just loved it so much. So basically we did a partnership with Dumb Ways to Die and had the license to use the IP for a couple of years, for 2 years, in order to make games around impact. So we launched an initiative for World Ocean Day last year in June. And what we did was we created Dumb Ways to Kill Oceans. So it's a series of little mini games which are developed as a mini playable advert, which is then distributed to about 10 million people. And the game was basically, it's very simple. You play a game which is about, the first mini game was about collecting plastics out of the ocean. The second one was just a little word quiz. I mean, it's at the end there and it's not that complicated, but it kind of gives the idea that, the polar ice caps are melting. And then the third one is about coral reef degradation, so a little game that you have to colour in the coral reef. But what was really important was to ask people questions about, did you know that this was an issue? And then what are you going to do about it? So it helped us then see what people really cared about, what they understood, what they didn't understand. Something that we found really interesting was the fact that when we look at what people cared about, coral reef degradation was kind of bottom of the list. So that kind of screams to us that there's a bit of work that has to be done in that space, because if every second breath that we take comes from the ocean and from plant life in the ocean, then we need coral reef to be able to survive on this planet. So the next thing for us is then to look at how do we get the message out to players that coral reef is really important and we need to protect it. So it gives us lots of insight in terms of where there are gaps in knowledge and how we can then fill that and educate players or just make them more aware. And this was it was a really fun one to do as well, because we had a number of partners that were involved. So we had National Geographic, who created an Instagram story where you swipe up and then you play the game. And we also worked with Clear Channel, who do out-of-home advertising. So you might see in some shopping centres, big screens, digital screens that you can touch. So we had the game on there, and it was, you don't often see a game being utilised in these spaces. But the footfall was incredible. People were walking up, they were engaging with it, and they were having conversations around plastics and what they can do around reducing their plastic consumption and using, skipping the straw and using reusable bags. So it started the conversation, but it was interesting to see the game being used in places that you wouldn't normally see a game, so that out-of-home swipe up and play on Instagram. So that was a really fun one to be part of. And another example, so has everybody heard of the Sustainable Development Goals? Lots of heads going. So everything that we do, we try and align it to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, because we believe that that's it's a great kind of framework to work within and to actually see that we're making progress, and to give us targets to work towards as well. So having worked in this space for a few years, and then the goals launched and we start aligning the impact that we're making to the goals, we realised that does everybody really know what the goals are and why they exist? So we created a game called What's Missing, and essentially it's a simple puzzle game where you have to fill in the blanks. I mean, this one's easy because you can see the outline, but some of them are quite difficult. So it helps you kind of recognise what the goals are and ask you questions about them. And then you're able to see what, you can then make a choice of what goal do you care most about. So you pick, 1 to 17, which goal you care most about. Okay, now make a pledge. And what was really interesting when we started analysing some of this information was that it looked like everybody cared about hunger, about eradicating hunger. But actually, when we looked at the actions that people were taking in the game, poverty was the one that was coming out at number one. So in terms of looking at, actions speak louder than words, we were able to understand, better what people's values were and what they cared about. So insight-wise, this was incredible. So yeah, everything we do aligns to the global goals. And in terms of what we believe, so we believe games do three things. They connect people through shared values. We could educate people on big issues. And we can try to, behaviour change is a big, big thing, but can we nudge behaviour in a positive direction in order to do things like to not use a plastic straw or be more aware of the straw issue? I mean, for example, in the US, 500 million straws are consumed on a daily basis. And when you hear that fact, you think, I need to do something about it. And actually, do I need my straw in my drink? No. So they're the sorts of messages on a very kind of simple level that we want to help the world understand better and align it all to the global goals. And I believe that gaming can create a massive positive impact in the world by aligning to these three pillars. And the shared values piece is really interesting. It's looking at connecting people through the areas that they care most about. And like with the example of Pokemon, we were talking to people about a topic that they cared about, and they were so motivated to do something about it, they went out and spent a day cleaning up their local areas. So there you've got that connection through shared value. And for the people who maybe didn't care so much, we're re-educating them on the topic. I mean, if 6,000 people took part last year and 17,000 people took part this year, maybe something happened last year that made them more aware of the issue that they wanted to do something about it this year. And again, we might see the numbers then increase for next year. And then that then links to behaviour change, or behaviour nudging and then behaviour change. And I think kind of linking back to what I was saying, I mean, if you look at this just kind of blows me away a bit in terms of how big our industry actually is. So we all know it's bigger than film and music combined, but when you see this graph, it's quite shocking. And I think the way that games could be used to make a powerful impact, we know it's a positive. They could be a positive force for good, but I think the rest of the world is still trying to catch up on that. There's an interesting article that was brought out by BBH, the advertising agency, to say that if someone went to a job interview and they said they knew nothing about film or music, they'd be laughed out the door. But it's okay for them to sit down and say they don't know anything about gaming. So I think that has to change. So mindsets are starting to change, and I think the past 12 months we've started to see a big shift in brands and agencies and non-gaming people start to understand our industry a bit better. So I think that will then start to change the perception of gaming and who gamers are and what games can actually do, and move away from being this kind of negative perception to a positive force for good. And I think this quote really kind of sums it up. You know, those who tell stories rule society. And games are about telling stories. And if we can shape our stories to be a positive impact in the world, we can start to nudge behaviour and make the world a better place. So that's our belief. But before I finish, I wanted to give a quick snapshot of something, which I'm really pleased I'm able to show this slide, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to show it today or not. But we launched a really important project with the UN today. So it goes live in the UK today. If you go to the website, it may not be open yet, but you could always kind of write it down and take a look at it later. But essentially, it's around climate change, and it's a campaign around. There's lots happening in the global warming climate change space at the moment. Companies are trying to make a difference, governments are trying to make a difference, but do we actually know what people care about? So we're launching this game in collaboration with UNDP in order to find out what people care about in terms of climate change and what actions that they want to see happen. So the game it's essentially like a public announcement, like a Sims-style game where you have to make certain choices and build up this world depending on the policies you want to see put into effect. And then you take a vote. Now, the vote bit is really important because we're going to collect those votes. It's all GDPR compliant, it's all anonymous information, but we collect those votes and then tell world leaders what people care about in order to try and affect change at a government level. So it's a really important project. It's probably one of the biggest, most important ones that we've worked on, but I'm kind of really proud of it and wanted to kind of show it off today. I'm glad that it's going to be live today and I can talk about it a little bit. So there's going to be more to come. We've got more coming out throughout the year, but essentially you can go to the website and there's all the data from gameplay will be there, so you'll be able to see how many people are voting and what they're voting on, and people from other countries. So it's going to be live in the UK, then Thailand, and people in other countries could then say, you know, I want my country to participate, and then we'll kind of follow the demand to then release versions for those countries that are specific to the issues that they face within those countries and the votes that they can make. In order to try and kind of be a voice for the people and take opinions to world leaders. So yeah, it'd be great to get your feedback if you play it, and let me know what you think. There's loads more we can do on it. So this is kind of like the pilot phase right now, and then we're going to be rolling out much more throughout the year. So I think on that note, I'm probably out of time. So yeah, just want to say thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you later on.
Thank you so much, Jude. Also, is the website www.mission1.